I'm about to try and do something that should not be possible. Set a lap time on F124 that is faster than the 1 minute mark. So this has only ever been done by Jarno Opmeer in 2021, and well, it's fair to say that I am nowhere near as fast as him. So to try and level the playing field, I've taken this My Team career mode car all the way from having 0 upgrades to being maxed out. And if you couldn't tell from the blurred footage in the background, I will be abusing track limits at every single turn because I'm going to need all of the help that I can get. Is this actually possible? Well, all I'm going to say is that this video gets insane. And it's now time for what I thought would be my first lap of this challenge, and it was a complete step into the unknown, and well, this is how it started. However, I did not let this faze me, as this maxed out car was always going to be difficult to learn how to drive. Going through what is now the first corner, I somehow took it pretty well with a nice drift, but that was definitely a fluke, and next up is turn 2 and turn 3. I just about managed to keep the car going in a straight line through these two corners, and then through the new turn 4, I should have shifted into 7th gear as I was once again in the barrier. But fortunately, I was very lucky that I didn't do a complete 360-degree spin, and we're now speeding up to the next new corner on this modified racetrack. Next up is the new turn 5, and I'm probably meant to take this corner flat out, but I don't quite have the talent for that just yet, but I didn't spin, so at least that's a positive. And now for the first time in this challenge, I'm about to take a corner properly, the turn 10 hairpin. To be honest, I've got absolutely no idea what I was doing going through here, but the car just turned so quickly, so I'm sure in the future I will get used to that, and we're now speeding up to the final part of this first lap. And as you can tell, going through the final chicane, I really didn't know what I was doing, but once again, I knew that there was so much time to find. And as we reached the end of this first lap in this challenge, I was just over 13.2 seconds away from the sub 1 minute lap time. And not too long after this, I'd recharged my battery and I was ready to go for another lap. Going through turn 1, I once again had a really good run, which was nice, and maybe last lap wasn't a fluke because I was now a second up to the delta. Through the next two corners, I didn't really gain any time, however, I just knew that I didn't need to spin on the entry to turn 5, so in normal Formula God fashion, I just did exactly that. However, because the spin that I had wasn't quite as bad as the one that I had on the previous lap, I was now almost 3 seconds up to the delta coming into the hairpin. This time, going through the hairpin, I decided that I was going to cut the grass, which I wasn't even sure if it would actually work, and even though I managed to gain half a second, I think I'll have to test it on the next lap to see if it's really worth sacrificing a good X. After this, going through the final chicane, I decided to fully send it, and well, unsurprisingly, that didn't work out. However, I was not worried as I had just made 3.5 seconds worth of progress, and I was now under 10 seconds away from the overall goal. Right, so it's now time to see if actually cutting the hairpin on my last two improvements have been worth it, as we're now coming into turn 10 2/10 up. Going through the corner, unlike the first lap, I didn't turn in too early, which is a positive, and initially, of course, I lost some time. However, on the exit, I made a massive improvement, and as we speed up to the final chicane, I was now half a second up. Fortunately for me, cutting through these two corners, I didn't spin this time, and I managed to gain a huge 1.8 seconds from this, which brought me under 8 seconds away from the sub 1 minute lap time. And now it's time for my first lap on medium tyres. Going through turn 1, I've genuinely got no idea how by switchbacking a car and running along the grass, I managed to gain 1/10 of a second. And as we speed up to the entry to turn 5, I was just desperate to not spin, and thankfully I didn't, which was absolutely massive for my progress in this challenge. And this is because as we leave this section of corners, I was almost 3 seconds up to the delta. Through the next two corners, I fully sent it over the sausage curbs, and I was now 3.3 seconds up and gaining, and we're going to fade into the final corner, so I maintain my gain until here. And then I pretty much threw all of it away as I smashed into the barrier on the entry to the main straight, so I managed to lose about a second worth of progress from this. However, I'm not complaining, as I knew that I could make up for this mistake, and I was now under 6 seconds away from the overall goal. And it's now time to do exactly that. Going through turn 1, this time I didn't have to overtake a car, which unsurprisingly gained me so much time, and we're actually going to speed up to the end of the second sector because that's where I'd make my next improvement. Going through these two corners, I was just so committed, and to be honest, I've got absolutely no idea, but I managed to gain well over a second, which is a huge amount considering I only needed to find 5 seconds to complete this challenge. And I also knew that there was so much time to find if I avoided the wall on the entry to the main straight. Somehow I actually managed to phase through this wall, but that doesn't matter because I just totaled my improvement on this lap to 3 seconds, and this was absolutely massive. And that's because I've just halved the gap that I've got to close if I really want to complete this sub 1 minute lap time with a maxed out My Team car challenge. And it's now time for my first lap on the soft tyres. Coming into the hairpin, I was slightly down to the delta, but I had a really good run going through here. This put me around 3.5 tenths up coming onto the back straight, and I was about to gain even more time. And this is because I was really lucky, and I got an absolutely brilliant slipstream off of Shogun Yu going down the back straight, which was so useful as I ran out of ERS a little early on this lap. Unfortunately though, I had to take a slightly worse line going through the final chicane, which wasn't ideal, but on this lap I still managed to gain over 2/10 of a second. And for my final improvement of the practice sessions, I gained the 2/10 back that I lost on the previous lap through the final corner, and then I picked up a very nice slipstream from Teo Pourchaire. Ultimately, on this lap I only gained half a tenth, but progress is progress, and it was now time for qualifying. So for the upcoming qualifying session, I had planned how much progress I would have to make in each session so I can complete this challenge. My aim for Q1 was to get within a second and a half of the sub 1 minute lap time, and for Q2 be within half a second. And this is with hopefully the final lap in the Q3 session being the lap to complete this challenge. However, I did not know if this was truly possible, as I had to find a pretty massive 2.5 seconds. Okay, so for my first banker lap of Q1, I set a lap time of exactly 1 minute and 3 seconds. So I knew that for my next improvement in Q1, I would just have to gain anything over 4.85 tenths of a second. And it's now time for my first full send lap of Q1. Coming into the end of the second sector, I was just under 2 tenths of a second down, and we're now going into turn 8 and turn 9. Going through these two corners, I didn't even let off the power, which worked out perfectly, and this meant that coming into the hairpin, I was over 6 tenths up, which is enough to make an overall improvement. To be honest, nothing really changed going through turn 10, however, I can't complain about that, and I also knew that there was a little bit of time to find in the final chicane. And to be fair, I didn't even have that good of a run going through the final corner, but I managed to gain even more time, which gave me an improvement of over 3/4 of a second, and I was now within 2.25 seconds of the overall goal. And it is now time for my final lap of Q1, and we're going to go through all of it because it is crazy. First up is the new turn 1, and I absolutely nailed the entry. However, I had a slight wobble on the exit, so there is definitely time to find there on future laps. But I was still 2 tenths up, which I improved on by another 3 tenths of a second by the end of the first sector. And this is where this lap gets insane. Going through turn 6 and 7, I gained a huge 8 tenths of a second, and this lap could move me under a second away from the sub 1 minute lap time. And we're actually going to skip all the way up to the turn 10 hairpin, as nothing really changed between turn 8 and 9, but trust me, I'm not complaining about that. So I actually took an awful line into turn 10, which to be fair could have gone a lot worse, because this car is absolutely on rails, and it genuinely turned in at a decent time. And this meant that by the time we reached the final chicane, I had only lost around 3 tenths of a second. So I'll be honest, I was super cautious going through these final two corners, because I honestly just wanted to make this improvement count. All I did was jump over the final chicane sausage curbs, and I actually made even more progress from this somehow, and in total I gained a full second worth of lap time. And this brought me under 1.3 seconds away from my goal. And it's now time for my first full send lap of Q2, and just for reference, I need anything over a tenth of a second worth of progress on this lap to make an overall improvement, which is exactly what I did going through turn 1, as I was now over 2 tenths up. And then going through the final corners of the first sector, I had an absolute masterclass, which brought me to a huge 6.5 tenths positive to the delta. And somehow I actually slightly improved on this through the next two corners. And now you're about to witness the biggest bottle possible. This time on the way into the hairpin, I took a proper racing line, but touched the grass, which sent me into a half spin, and I only just about managed to keep the car going in a straight line. And so frustratingly, this had cost me a huge half a second worth of lap time. Fortunately for me, I slightly gained a little bit of lap time on the back straight from having more ERS than the last lap, which I maintained going through the final chicane, and I was now just over a second away from the goal. So I actually didn't go for another lap in Q2, and this is because I wanted to save 2 sets of fresh soft tyres for the final qualifying session where there is optimum grip. Because let's be honest, I'm going to need every advantage that I can get. And once again, just for reference, for this first Q3 push lap, I needed to gain half a second for an overall improvement. So for the first time in any of these qualifying sessions, I actually didn't gain any time going through turn 1, but eventually on the exit with a little bit of battery usage, I was now 2 tenths up. Luckily for me, I managed to maintain this going through the next two corners, and then going through the start of the second sector corners, I really tried to prioritise the exit out of them, which worked perfectly as I was now 4 tenths up. So we're now coming into turn 8 and 9, and unsurprisingly, I had the usual Formula God bottle on an important lap where I smashed into the wall on the exit, which brought me back down to over 2 tenths up into the hairpin. And to be honest, I didn't even have that good of a run going through turn 10, however, I did bring myself back to half a second positive to the delta, and I'd saved a lot more battery to use along this back straight. And thankfully, I'd perfectly saved my battery on this lap, because going down this back straight, I gained a huge 3.5 tenths. And then going through the final chicane, I improved by another half a tenth, and I just set a lap time under 6 tenths away from the overall goal. So obviously, I was absolutely delighted with this, but I now had just one lap which I had to complete this challenge and almost 6 tenths to improve by, which is a hell of a lot of lap time. And this meant that this lap had to just be absolutely perfect. I had done it. In the end, I broke the 1 minute mark by just under 0.2 of a second, which I was absolutely delighted with, and thank you all so much for watching. And by the way, please subscribe, as I'm currently on to hit 20,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I know it is so possible to achieve with your help.